Sometimes the saddest loneliness hides in the quietest people. You know that feeling when you come home to an empty place and wonder if anyone would care if you just vanished. In the little town of Willow Gap, Miss Eliza Hart teaches kids at school and goes home alone every night. Her boyfriend never came back from the war, leaving her with just memories and a rented room that feels more like a grave than a home. Across town, Thatcher Cole built a ranch all by himself, but he made it for a family he never got to have. His house is quiet, and people in town talk about the big, kind man who seems scared to let anyone get close. When a storm breaks Eliza's roof, she ends up at Thatcher's door with nowhere else to go. What he does changes everything for them. But can two people who forgot how to dream learn to love again? Before we go on, tell us where you're listening from. And if this story grabs you, hit that subscribe button because tomorrow I've got something extra cool for you. The morning sun stretched long shadows across Willow Gap's dusty main street, where old wooden shops stood like tired guards against another hot day. This was a town that had seen good days and bad ones, where everyone knew everyone's business, but respected the quiet moments of frontier life. It was the kind of place where you could get lost in the same old routine, finding both comfort and sadness in how predictable each day was. Miss Eliza Hart walked carefully along the bumpy boardwalk, her worn leather bag full of school lessons held tight. At 28, she moved with the calm grace of someone who had learned to rely on herself. Her dark hair was tied back simply, not fancy, and her blue cotton dress had patches on the sleeves from chalk dust and kids' excitement. The schoolhouse sat at the edge of town like a bright spot of hope, its white wooden walls shining in the morning light. Eliza came to Willow Gap 3 years ago, with just her teaching papers and a broken heart that still hurt from news she'd never forget. Samuel Winters, her fiancé, died at Gettysburg. The telegram was short and harsh. Regret to inform you, Private Samuel Winters killed in action, July 2nd. Remains not recovered. Deepest sympathies. She opened the schoolhouse door and smelled the familiar mix of chalk dust and pine wood. This place was her safe spot, where kids aged 6 to 14 reminded her every day that hope could grow even in tough times. Her teaching book, an old leather, one from her own teacher back in Pennsylvania, sat open on her desk from the night before. Its pages were soft from use, with notes in the margins about what each kid needed. "Good morning, Miss Hart," shouted young Jimmy Brennan as he ran in, his freckled face full of energy. "Ma says a big storm's coming tonight." Eliza smiled, her serious face turning warm and kind. "Good morning, Jimmy. Let's hope your ma's wrong about that storm. Now take your seat and help me get the slates ready." As the kids came in, Eliza felt that familiar squeeze in her chest that came with the morning routine. She loved these moments when the schoolhouse filled with talking and laughing, when the loneliness that followed her like a shadow seemed to hide in the corners. Here, she was needed. Here, she mattered. The day went on with the usual rhythm of lessons, geography about faraway states, math problems on slates, reading from McGuffey's book. Eliza moved between the kids easily, fixing a pencil grip here, giving a kind word there, always knowing that for some of these kids, school was the only place they felt cared for. As the afternoon went on, she saw the sky getting dark through the schoolhouse windows. Jimmy's mom might have been right about that storm. The wind started blowing, shaking the windows and making dust swirl outside. "Kids, let's end class a bit early today," she said, seeing worry on their faces. "Grab your stuff and go straight home. No messing around." The kids left quickly but neatly, each saying a polite goodbye before rushing into the growing wind. Eliza watched from the doorway as they scattered toward their homes, small shapes leaning against the gusts, and felt that old pang of watching others go to families while she went to loneliness. She locked the schoolhouse and started walking home, holding her shawl tight against the wind. Her rented room at Mrs. Patterson's house was small, just big enough for a narrow bed, a washstand, and a table where she planned lessons by lamplight. It was hers, paid for with her teacher's pay, and she'd made it as cozy as she could. A few books sat on a shelf, and dried flowers from her students decorated the window. Mrs. Patterson met her at the door looking nervous. "Oh, Miss Hart, I'm so worried about this storm." The roof's been creaking all day. I keep thinking we should hide in the cellar, but last time we did, the dampness was bad for poor Mr. Patterson's lungs. Eliza touched her arm gently. I'm sure we'll be okay, Mrs. Patterson. These old houses have seen lots of storms. But as she climbed the narrow stairs to her room, Eliza couldn't shake the feeling that something big was coming, more than just the wind. Meanwhile, 3 miles outside town, Thatcher Cole stood on his porch, watching storm clouds gather like a dark army on the horizon. At 35, he was a big man, 6'4", strong enough to calm a scared horse or chop wood. Easily. His dark hair had a bit of early gray, and his green eyes showed a calm that came from learning young that life could take everything away fast. His cabin was sturdy, built to last, with thick log walls and a stone chimney that worked even in bad weather. He'd built it himself 7 years ago after buying the land with money saved from working other people's cattle. Every board, stone, and nail was placed with the dream of a family that would fill the rooms with laughter and love. But the rooms stayed empty, just echoing his footsteps. He knew it was ironic that he'd built a home for a family while living, like a hermit. Townsfolk saw him as a fair, honest man who helped neighbors, but they also felt he kept people at a distance. He couldn't blame them. After losing his parents and sister in a fire when he was 20, he learned that loving someone meant risking a pain so deep it could leave you broken for years. Better to stay alone, care for his land and cattle, and find comfort in the steady work of ranching. Thunder rumbled far off, and his horses neighed nervously. He'd need to get them and the cattle into the barn soon. This storm was going to be bad, the kind that could rip off roofs or flood dry creeks fast. As he headed to the barn, he thought briefly of the schoolteacher in town. He'd seen Miss Hart at church and town events, noticed her quiet dignity and how kids loved her like she was magic. Something about her spoke to his lonely heart, but he never dared to talk to her beyond polite nods. A woman like her, smart and proper, wouldn't want a rough rancher who talked to cows more than people. He'd heard whispers about her lost love, the fiancé who died in the war, and he respected her private grief. He knew what it was like to carry sadness like a heavy stone. The wind got stronger, blowing his hat across the yard. As he chased it, the first big raindrops fell, and Thatcher hurried to get his animals safe. He didn't know that in town, similar preparations were happening, and before the night was over, 2 lonely lives would cross in a way that would change everything. The storm hit Willow Gap just after 8, coming with a fury like it had traveled 1,000 miles just to wreck this little town. Rain poured down hard, driven by winds that screamed around buildings and through shutter gaps. Lightning lit up the sky with wild beauty, and thunder shook the ground. In her small room, Eliza tried to grade papers by lamplight, but the storm made it impossible to focus. The boarding house creaked and groaned, and she thought of her students, hoping they were safe at home with parents to calm their fears. She'd just put down her pen when a huge crash came from above, like the world was breaking. Wood splintered. Water rushed in, and her ceiling collapsed in a mess of wet timber and plaster. Eliza threw herself against the wall, covering her head as debris fell. When it stopped, she was soaked, her things scattered and ruined, with a big hole letting the storm pour in. Mrs. Patterson's scared voice came from downstairs. "Miss Hart, are you alive up there?" "I'm alive," Eliza called back, though she wasn't sure how. She grabbed what she could, her teaching book, which was somehow okay, and a few dry clothes, and carefully went down the shaky stairs. Mrs. Patterson met her in the hall, her nightgown wet and her gray hair wild with worry. "Oh, dear girl, I'm so sorry. The roof beam broke. I've been worried about it for months, but we couldn't afford to fix it." Mr. Patterson stood behind her, shaking his head. "Can't fix it tonight, that's for sure. It'll take weeks to get materials and workers. Miss Hart, your room's not livable." Eliza nodded, trying to understand her situation. She was homeless in a storm with no money for another place to stay. The other boarding houses were full, and she knew the Pattersons couldn't keep her for free. "Don't worry, dear," Mrs. Patterson said, though she sounded unsure. "We'll figure something out. Maybe Mrs. Hendricks has room, or the Reverend and his wife." But Eliza knew options were few. Mrs. Hendricks's place was full, and the Reverend's house was crowded with his big family. In a town like Willow Gap, extra beds were rare. Standing there, wet and cold, listening to the storm, Eliza felt totally alone. She'd learned to take care of herself, but sometimes life left you with no choice but to face how vulnerable you were. That's when she thought of the cabin outside town and the man who lived there, maybe as lonely as she was. Walking to Thatcher Cole's ranch took all her courage. Rain stung her face like cold needles, and the wind tried to rip her wet shawl away. She held her teaching book tight, its leather cover slick but still whole, and forced herself to keep walking. What was she doing? A proper single woman didn't show up at a bachelor's house in the middle of the night, soaked and desperate. The gossip could cost her her job, but what else could she do? Sleep in a barn or huddle in the church? Thatcher's cabin appeared in the dark, its windows glowing, with warm light like a safe haven. Eliza stopped at the edge of his land, frozen by the thought of what she was about to do. Her mother's warnings about reputation rang in her head, but another gust of wind pushed her forward. She stumbled up the porch steps and raised her hand to knock. Before she could, the door opened. Thatcher Cole stood there, his big frame blocking the light. He wore work pants and a cotton shirt with rolled-up sleeves, his dark hair messy like he'd been running his hands through it. When he saw her, his green eyes widened with surprise and worry. "Miss Hart? What are you doing out in this storm?" Eliza tried to speak, but words wouldn't come. She stood there, dripping on his porch, holding her book like it was all she had, tears mixing with the rain on her face. The night's events, the roof, her ruined things, being homeless, hit her hard and she started shaking. Thatcher didn't hesitate. He gently took her arm. "Come in before you get sick." He led her inside and started closing shutters against the storm. "You're soaked. What happened?" "The roof," Eliza said, her teeth chattering. "At Mrs. Patterson's it collapsed. I have nowhere—" She couldn't finish. Thatcher was already moving, grabbing a handmade quilt from a chair by the fireplace. It was beautiful, with deep blue and green patterns like a forest pool, stitched with care. She wondered where he got such a lovely thing. "Here," he said, wrapping it around her shoulders. It was soft, warm, and smelled like cedar and something comforting. "Sit by the fire while I get you dry clothes." "I can't," Eliza started, but he stopped her. "Miss Hart, you're shaking so bad you can barely talk. We'll worry about what's proper after you're not freezing." He went into what must be his bedroom, leaving Eliza to look around. The cabin wasn't what she expected. Instead of a plain, empty space, it was cozy and beautiful. The furniture was handmade and polished. Bookshelves lined a wall with books that showed he loved learning, and a chess set sat on a table, its pieces carved from local wood. On the fireplace mantel, she saw a photo of what must be his family, a pocket watch, and a few small things arranged with care, showing they meant a lot to him. This wasn't a rough cowboy's house, but one of a man who loved beauty and knowledge. Thatcher came back with clothes, a wool shirt too big for her, thick socks, and trousers with suspenders. "These were my father's," he said. "They'll be big, but they're dry and warm. Change in the bedroom." Eliza took the clothes, her hands steadier now. "Mr. Cole, I don't know how to thank you. I know this is strange." "Nothing strange about helping a neighbor in trouble," he said kindly. "Go change before you get sick." The bedroom was as neat as the main room, with a big bed covered in quilts and pillows that looked handmade. Eliza changed fast, thankful for the warm, dry clothes, even if they hung on her like a scarecrow's. When she came out, Thatcher was by the fire, his movements quick and sure. He'd made tea in a fancy china set that didn't match his rugged look, and set out bread and jam on the table. When he saw her, his eyes softened, making her aware of how she looked in his father's huge clothes, her damp hair loose around her shoulders. "Better?" he asked, and she nodded. "Much better, thank you." She took the tea he offered, holding it for warmth. "I'm sorry to barge in like this. I had nowhere else to go." Thatcher sat across from her, his big hands around his own cup. "No bother. I was just sitting here listening to the storm, thinking how empty this place feels sometimes." He seemed surprised he'd said that out loud. They sat quietly for a bit, just the fire crackling and the storm raging outside. Eliza looked at his face in the firelight, noticing his strong jaw and the way his eyes crinkled a little, like he smiled more than he let on. "This quilt," she said, touching it. "It's so pretty. The stitching is amazing." Thatcher's cheeks turned red. "I made it myself, actually, during long winter nights. Keeps my hands busy." Eliza stared at him, shocked. "You made this? The patterns are so detailed. My ma taught me before she died. Said a man should know how to fix and make things same as a woman. Useful skill." He shrugged, but she could see he was proud. This changed how she saw him. The cozy home, the beautiful quilt, the kind way he welcomed her. These weren't things a rough rancher did, but someone who knew how to be gentle and make beauty even when alone. "Mr. Cole," she started, then stopped, unsure how to say what she felt. "Thatcher," he said quietly, "given what's happened, let's skip the formal stuff." "Thatcher," she said, his name feeling new and close. "I need to ask something, and I know it's bold." He waited, his green eyes steady. "I have nowhere to go," she said quickly. "Mrs. Patterson's roof will take weeks to fix, if she can afford it. The other boarding houses are full, and I can't pay to go to another town. I know it's not proper, but could I stay here just for a bit until I figure things out?" The silence stretched, only the storm's noise between them. Eliza held her breath, expecting a polite no that would leave her with nowhere to turn. Instead, Thatcher leaned forward, elbows on his knees, and looked right at her. "Miss Hart, Eliza, I want you to listen close." Her heart pounded as she nodded. "You've got no place to stay," he said softly, "and I've got an empty bed." Eliza's face went pale. She started to stand, shocked and hurt. Had she misjudged him? Was this the price for his help? But Thatcher reached out, his hand gentle on her arm. "Wait, that came out wrong. Please." He took a deep breath, his voice steady now. "What I meant is, you need a home, and I have one that's too big for just me. You need a safe place, and I can give that. Not like it sounded. I mean a place where you're not alone, where you're safe and cared for. Nothing more than you're okay with. Nothing that would hurt your honor or mine." Eliza sat back, down, her heart still racing. "I don't understand." Thatcher ran a hand through his hair, searching for words. "I built this place for a family I never had. For 7 years. I've been alone here, and it gets lonely. You need a place to stay, and I need, well, someone to talk to share this space with. Maybe we can help each other. What will people say? People talk no matter what, but anyone who knows us knows we're decent, and if it bothers you, I'll sleep in the barn." Eliza looked around the warm room, then at this man, who'd opened his door without question, wrapped her in his quilt, and offered her more than just a roof. Her practical side listed the risks: gossip, losing her job, what people would think. But her lonely heart, aching for 3 years, whispered that maybe this was exactly where she belonged. "Okay," she said softly. "If you're sure it's not too much trouble." Thatcher's face lit up with a real smile, making him look younger and warm. "No trouble at all, Eliza. No trouble at all." Outside, the storm kept raging, but inside the cabin, 2 lonely people found something they hadn't dared hope for, a chance for their empty hearts to feel full again. Eliza woke to bird songs and the soft creak of the cabin's wood. For a moment, she lay still in Thatcher's big bed, confused by the morning light coming from the wrong direction and the missing sound of Mrs. Patterson calling to her husband about breakfast. Then she remembered the storm, the broken roof, her, walk through the rain and Thatcher's kindness. She'd wanted to sleep on the small couch, but Thatcher insisted on giving her the bed and took blankets to the barn. It was kind and practical, but it made her feel like she owed him in ways she wasn't ready for. Wrapped in his father's big clothes, surrounded by the smell of cedar and leather, she felt how awkward her situation was. How do you act normal when you're staying in a bachelor's house? How do you stay proper in pants held up by suspenders? A soft knock at the door broke her thoughts. "Eliza, I made coffee and biscuits. No hurry, though. Sleep as long as you want." His voice was as kind as the night before, and she answered before thinking. I'm awake. I'll be out soon. She got up, braided her hair simply, and rolled up the shirt sleeves so her hands were free. When she stepped out, Thatcher was at the stove, cooking eggs. He'd been up a while, his hair damp from washing, wearing clean clothes like he'd planned for her being there. Good morning, she said quietly, and he turned with a smile that warmed the whole room. Morning. Hope you slept okay? I was worried the couch might not be comfy enough. The bed was great, but you shouldn't have given up your room. I'd have been fine on the couch. Thatcher shook his head as he put eggs and biscuits on plates. My ma would haunt me if I let a lady sleep on the couch when there's a real bed. Besides, I slept fine in the barn. Done it before. He set a plate in front of her, and Eliza noticed how careful he was. The eggs were cooked just right, the biscuits golden, and he'd even found a little jar of homemade jam. You didn't have to do all this, she said, but he brushed it off. No trouble. I always cook too much. Habit from ranch work when you don't know how many people might show up hungry. They ate quietly, the morning light showing more of the cabin she hadn't seen in the dark. Eliza's eyes went to the bookshelf again, seeing books like Shakespeare, Dickens, and a worn poetry book. You've got a lot of books, she said, and Thatcher looked over. Books are my only splurge. When work's done and nights get long, nothing beats a good story. He paused, a bit shy. I know folks don't expect that from a rancher. Why not? Eliza asked, curious. Smart people can be anything. Her words seemed to ease him. Most folks here think a guy who works with his hands doesn't need books. You're the first who's not shocked to see my shelves. I'm around books all day. I care more about what someone reads than if they read. She pointed to a thin book of Whitman's poems. That's one of my favorites. Mine too, Thatcher said, his smile softer. I like how he writes about the land and finding meaning in everyday stuff. They might have kept talking, but a loud knock at the door stopped them. Thatcher went to answer, and Eliza heard Mrs. Henderson, the town's biggest gossip. Mr. Cole, sorry for the early visit, but I wanted to check if you're okay after the storm. It was awful. Trees down, roofs damaged. Poor Mrs. Patterson's boarding house got hit bad. Eliza's cheeks burned as she realized her being at Thatcher's would soon be big news. She looked for a place to hide, but the cabin was too open. I'm fine, Mrs. Henderson. Thanks for checking, Thatcher said calmly. The cabin held up. Oh, good. And I don't suppose you've heard about poor Miss Hart. Her room was destroyed, and no one knows where she went. I'm so worried about her in this storm with nowhere to go. There was a pause, and Eliza knew Thatcher was deciding what to say. He could lie, but that would only delay the gossip. Or he could tell the truth and face the talk right away. Actually, Mrs. Henderson, Miss Hart is here. Her roof collapsed, and I gave her a place to stay until she figures things out. The silence was so thick, Eliza could hear her own heartbeat. Then Mrs. Henderson's voice went high with shock and excitement. She's here now? Oh, Mr. Cole, you know how this looks. It looks like helping a neighbor in trouble, Thatcher said firmly. Miss Hart was soaked and had nowhere else to go. I gave her shelter, nothing more. But the rules, Mr. Cole. An unmarried man and woman in the same house. I slept in the barn, Mrs. Henderson. Miss Hart had the cabin to herself. Eliza closed her eyes, knowing his honest answer wouldn't stop the gossip. By noon, everyone in town would know where she'd been. By night, the story would be twisted into something else entirely. Maybe I should talk to Miss Hart, Mrs. Henderson said, like she was doing her duty to check on Eliza's situation. Before Thatcher could answer, Eliza stood and walked to the door. If she was going to face the town's judgment, she'd do it herself. Good morning, Mrs. Henderson, she said, trying to sound dignified despite the oversized clothes and messy braid. Mrs. Henderson's eyes got wide as she saw Eliza's outfit. The big shirt, rolled-up pants, and loose hair that looked too cozy for a proper lady. Miss Hart, what happened to you? My roof collapsed like you said. Mr. Cole was kind enough to let me stay. I'm very thankful for his help. Yes, but dear, you know how this looks. Your reputation, your job at the school. My reputation comes from 3 years of teaching this town's kids, Eliza said calmly. I don't think one night of emergency shelter changes that. But she could see doubt in Mrs. Henderson's eyes, already planning how to share this juicy news. In a small town, reputation was everything, and Eliza's had just taken a hit. After Mrs. Henderson left, promising to check on Eliza with other town ladies, Eliza sat down and put her head in her hands. "I'm so sorry," she whispered. "I've messed everything up. Your reputation, my job." "Hey," Thatcher's voice was soft as he knelt beside her. "Look at me." She lifted her head, meeting his steady green eyes. "My reputation can handle whatever they say. I'm more worried about yours. What if they fire me from the school? What if they say I'm not good enough to teach their kids? Then, they're fools who don't deserve someone as good as you." He paused, then added quietly, "And if that happens, you'll still have a place here as long as you need it." His kind offer made her eyes water. "Why are you so nice to me? You hardly know me." Thatcher looked out the window, where the morning sun was clearing the storm clouds. "Maybe because I know what it's like to be alone. Maybe because kindness is sometimes all we've got to give each other." He went to a shelf and pulled out a small wooden box, worn from being handled. From it, he took a bundle of letters tied with a faded ribbon, letters that looked read over and over. "These were from someone I loved once," he said, not looking at her. "She died of fever before we could marry. I kept thinking I should put them away, move on, but they're all I have of what could have been." He held the letters a moment, then put them back. "I'm not saying this for pity or to make you feel like you owe me. I'm saying it because I get what it's like to lose someone, to have your life change in ways you didn't pick. And I know what it's like to be grateful when someone gives you a chance to start over." Eliza looked at him, seeing his loneliness, so like her own. Here was a man who'd built a home for love that never came, who'd learned to make beauty alone, who understood the pain of empty rooms and quiet meals. "Samuel's letters," she said softly. "I have them too in my teaching book. They're the only things that survived the roof collapse." Thatcher nodded, like he expected that. "Sometimes the past is all we have to remind us who we used to be. And sometimes," Eliza said, surprising herself, "it stops us from becoming who we could be." The moment felt big, full of understanding and new possibilities, the start of something neither expected. Outside, the town was already buzzing with gossip about the teacher and the rancher. But inside the cabin, two hurt hearts were learning that healing might start with not being alone. The chess set sat between them on the small table like a game of carved chances. 3 days had passed since the storm, and what started as an emergency stay was feeling a little too cozy, almost like a real home. Eliza had tried twice to find another place to stay, but Mrs. Henderson's gossip had shut those doors. The other boarding house had no rooms, and families who might have taken her in were now worried about what people would think. "Your move," Thatcher said quietly, his green eyes on the chessboard, not her face. They'd found the chess set on her second night when she noticed how beautifully the pieces were carved from local wood. Eliza looked at the board, but her mind was half on the game and half on the man across from her. She noticed how his big hands moved the pieces gently, how his brow wrinkled when he was thinking. Living so close had shown her sides of Thatcher. Cole the town didn't know. He woke before dawn to tend his cattle, moving quietly so he wouldn't wake her. When she got up, there was always fresh coffee and a simple breakfast waiting. Eggs from his chickens, bread he baked, jam from berries he picked. The same care that made the quilt showed in everything he did. "You're distracted," he said kindly. "Something wrong?" Eliza moved her bishop, then leaned back. "Mrs. Ashford from the school board came by today. She wanted to talk about my living here and how it might affect my job as a good example for the kids." Thatcher's hand stopped over his next move. "What did you say?" "The truth. That you gave me a place to stay when I had nowhere else. That you've been nothing but kind and proper, and my situation doesn't change how I teach math and reading." Thatcher moved his knight, putting her queen in danger. "What did she say?" "She said the board's meeting next week to talk about it. She didn't say it outright, but I think they might fire me." Eliza stared at the board, not really seeing it. 3 years of hard work, and it all comes down to staying a few nights in your house. I'm sorry." His words were heavy with regret. "If I'd thought it through, maybe I could have found another way that wouldn't." "Put your job at risk." Eliza looked at him sharply. Are you saying you should have left me in the street to keep the town happy? No, but maybe... Thatcher Cole, if you're about to say helping someone in trouble was a mistake, I'll be real disappointed in you. Her tone surprised him. He leaned back, studying her. You're not mad about the situation. You're mad about how they're reacting. Of course I'm mad about that. These people talk about being good Christians, about kindness and helping others. But the second someone actually does that in a way they don't like, they turn into gossiping bullies. Her strong words surprised them both. Eliza had always been careful to stay calm and polite with the town, knowing her job needed her to be diplomatic. But living with Thatcher, seeing his quiet kindness, showed her the difference between real goodness and fake virtue. I've watched you these last few days, she went on, softer but still strong. The way you care for your animals, the effort you put into every little thing, the respect you show for the food you make and this home you built. There's more real kindness in you than in the whole school board put together. Thatcher was quiet, his eyes moving between her and the chess pieces. When he spoke, he sounded amazed. Most folks see what they expect. A big, rough cowboy good for ranch work and nothing else. Then most folks are dumb. Her blunt words made him laugh, and Eliza felt happy hearing it. In 3 days, she'd learned his smiles were rare and his laughter even rarer. You know, he said, moving his rook to block her bishop. When I built this cabin, I imagined conversations like this. Someone to talk to at night. Someone who sees more than just the surface. What else did you imagine? The question slipped out, and she blushed, but Thatcher didn't seem shy. Meals shared, not eaten alone, reading to someone in winter, maybe music. I always hoped for someone who played piano, but there's no room for one here. He waved at the small cabin. Simple stuff, mostly. Someone to make this house feel like a home. Do you play anything? Harmonica. A little. Nothing. Fancy. He seemed shy about it. You? I noticed you humming yesterday while fixing your skirt. I used to play piano before I came here, and I sing, but not great. She moved her queen to safety, thinking of music nights back in Pennsylvania before the war changed everything. I miss having music in my life. There's a piano at the church, old and out of tune, but it works. Mrs. Ashford made it clear I might not be welcome at church events, given where I'm staying. Thatcher's face darkened. Adelaide Ashford is a stuck-up busybody who wouldn't know kindness if it knocked on her door. His harsh words surprised Eliza. He never spoke badly of anyone. You don't like her much. I don't. Like fake people, and she's one of the worst. All talk about goodness, but when old Henrik Peterson was dying last winter and needed help with his cattle, where was her kindness? I spent 3 weeks keeping his herd alive while she prayed and felt good about herself. You never mentioned helping Mr. Peterson. Why would I? You do what needs doing. You don't brag about it. His simple words showed more about him than anything else could. Eliza studied his face in the lamplight, noticing his strong jaw and the way his eyes crinkled when he focused. When had she started thinking he wasn't just nice-looking, but really handsome? Check, she said, moving her queen. Thatcher looked at the board, then at her with something like respect. You planned that for 6 moves. 7, actually. Remind me never to underestimate you, Eliza. He said her name carefully, and it sent warmth through her. I thought we agreed on first names. Eliza, then. The way he said it made her heart beat faster. But I gotta ask, where does schoolteacher learn to play chess like a war planner? My dad taught me. He said a woman needs to think ahead, on a chessboard or in life. She paused, then added softly, he also said the most important thing is knowing when to give up a piece to save something more important. Smart man. Eliza moved a pawn, setting up her final move. He died when I was 22. The fever that took him got my mom 6 months later. That's when I decided to come west and teach. You were all alone. Samuel was already fighting, and there wasn't much left for me in Pennsylvania. The West seemed like a place to start fresh. Thatcher nodded, understanding without words. That's why I came here, too. After my family died, I couldn't stay where everything reminded me of them. Do you ever regret it? Sometimes. But then I look at this place, what I've built, and I think maybe it's not about escaping the past, but making something worth it. Eliza looked around the cabin. The careful furniture, the loved books, the small touches that showed a man who made beauty even alone. You've done that. This is a home worth anybody's memory. It's better with you here. His words hung heavy between them, full of meaning they weren't ready to fully face. Eliza's heart raced, suddenly seeing him not just as a kind neighbor, but as a man. That's checkmate, he said softly, moving his king to end the game. Eliza stared at the board, realizing he'd outplayed her while she was focused on her own plan. How did you... I had you? You were trying to win fast. I wanted the game to last. Their eyes met across the table, and Eliza felt something change. What started as a place to stay was turning into something else. Something about how he looked at her when he thought she didn't notice, or how her heart jumped when his hand brushed hers at dinner. Another game? She asked, though it wasn't just about chess. As many as you want, Thatcher said, his voice softer. We've got all the time in the world. But they both knew time was short. The school board meeting was coming, and it could take away Eliza's job and her reason to stay in Willow Gap. The thought of leaving this cabin, this man who showed her what friendship could feel like, filled her with a longing she wasn't sure she was brave enough to face. The school bell's cracked bronze surface shone in the afternoon sun as Eliza touched its worn edge. Despite a big crack, it still rang clear when hit, its sound carrying across the schoolyard with purpose. Like me, she thought with a sad smile, cracked but still working, scarred but still singing. She got to school early that Monday to prepare for what might be her last week teaching, depending on the school board's decision. The weekend at Thatcher's cabin had been strained, both of them careful not to talk about the growing feelings between them, something deeper they weren't ready to name. Miss Hart, a voice called from the doorway, making her turn. A man stood there, tall in fancy clothes that didn't fit Willow Gap's simple style. As he stepped into the light, she saw he was about 45, with silver hair and a confident look that showed wealth and power. I'm Jeremiah Blackwood, he said, taking off his hat politely. I've been wanting to talk to you. Eliza had heard of him but never met him. Jeremiah Blackwood owned lots of land, ranches, mines, and timber that made him one of the most powerful men around. Why he'd want to talk to a small-town teacher, she couldn't guess. Mr. Blackwood, how can I help you? His smile was smooth, like he'd planned it. Actually, I think I can help you. I heard about your trouble with where you're staying, and I have an idea that could fix things. Eliza felt a chill. What kind of idea? Maybe we could talk somewhere private. It's a delicate matter. Against her better judgment, Eliza pointed to the schoolhouse. We can talk inside, but my students are coming soon. Blackwood followed her in, looking at the simple desks, slates, and small library with a hint of dislike, like the plain room wasn't good enough for him. Miss Hart, I'll be straight. I know the school board's worried about you living with Mr. Cole. Those worries might cost you your job, and I need a wife. His blunt words hit her like a punch. She stared, sure she'd heard wrong. Excuse me? A wife, Blackwood said calmly. I'm growing my business, and that needs a certain kind of respectability. A wife would give me that, especially someone like you, educated and respected. My respect is being questioned, like you just said, only because you're with Cole. Marrying me would fix your reputation and give you a better life. Nice clothes, a big house, the kind of life a lady like you deserves. Eliza felt dizzy, like the world had tilted. Mr. Blackwood, I don't even know you. What you're suggesting, I'm suggesting something practical that helps us both. You need security and respect. I need a wife to help with my business's social side. It's not romantic, but it makes sense. And if I say no? His face hardened, just a little. I'd hate for a good teacher to lose her job over something as small as where she sleeps. Small towns can be harsh about what's proper. His words were a polite threat. Eliza felt angry. Are you saying you can control the school board? I'm saying I have a lot of influence. Over the school board, the boarding houses, the bank that owns most businesses here, and the officials who fund schools like this. It clicked. Blackwood wasn't just offering marriage. He was showing he controlled her whole life. Say no, and she'd be jobless, homeless, and out of options. You need time to think, of course, Blackwood said smoothly. Let's say 1 week. That's enough time to decide. If I marry you, what do you expect? The usual wife stuff, hosting my parties, running my house, looking happy, kids eventually, to carry on my name. He looked at her in a way that made her skin crawl. I think you'll find me a fair husband, Miss Hart. I don't need love, just cooperation. The word cooperation felt like poison. Eliza thought of Thatcher's kindness, his respect for her, and this man's cold plan made her sick. I'll think about it, she said, though she wanted to scream no. 1 week, he said, then left. Eliza sat at her desk, trying to process. Blackwood had trapped her, making marriage to him the only way to avoid ruin. And the worst part? He probably could do everything he threatened. The kids' voices outside pulled her back. She had a job to do, maybe only for a few more days, and she wouldn't let Blackwood take her focus from her students. The day passed in a blur of lessons, but she watched her kids closely, memorizing their faces in case she had to leave them. When the last kid left, she stayed at her desk, staring at the cracked bell, wondering how things got so messy. Thatcher appeared in the doorway, hat in hand, worry on his face. Eliza, you're usually home by now. Everything okay? The word home hurt her heart. When had his cabin become home? When had seeing him become the best part of her? Day? I had a visitor, she said, then told him about Blackwood's offer and threats. Thatcher's face got darker with every word. When she finished, his hands were fists. That no good. He stopped, remembering they were in the school. He can't force you to marry him, Eliza. There are laws. What laws stop a man from refusing to rent to someone he thinks is bad? What laws make the school board ignore big shots like him? He's not forcing me, Thatcher. He's just making it so marrying him is my only choice. There's gotta be another way. Thatcher was quiet, looking around the schoolroom at her neat supplies and the kids' work on the walls. Marry me instead. The words hit like a shock. What? Marry me, he said, surer now. If you're married, Blackwood can't use scandal against you. Your job would be safe, and you'd have my name and home to protect you. Eliza stared, her heart pounding. Thatcher, we've only known each other a week, long enough to know you're kind, brave, and care more about those kids than yourself, long enough to know living with you has made me happier than I've been since my family died. He stepped closer, his green eyes locked on hers. And long enough to know the thought of you with Blackwood makes me want to break something. His honesty took her breath away. But marriage isn't just a fix. There should be love, feelings. There could be, maybe there already is, a little. The idea hung there, full of danger and hope. Eliza thought of their nights talking by the fire, how her heart raced when he smiled, how safe she felt with him. Eliza, he said, stepping closer, I'm not saying this is how I pictured proposing, but the idea of building a life with you feels better than anything I've wanted in years. And if it doesn't work, if we're not right for each other, we'll figure it out together. But at least you'll have real choices, not ones Blackwood forces on you. The cracked bell caught the afternoon light, shining despite its flaws, still ringing true. Maybe, Eliza thought, that was enough to build something lasting on. The pressed wildflower lay between the pages of Whitman's poetry, like a hidden treasure. Eliza found it by accident while borrowing the book from Thatcher's shelf. It was a delicate prairie rose, still pink, perfectly kept. She held it to the lamplight, wondering when he'd put it there and why. Find something cool? Thatcher's voice from the doorway startled her. She'd been so caught up she hadn't heard him come in from chores. Her cheeks burned. She was in his chair, reading his book, looking at something personal. Sorry, she said, moving to put the flower back. I shouldn't have. It's okay, he said, his face hard to read. I put it there. Last spring. Found it by the creek and thought it was too pretty to leave. It's beautiful. She looked at him, trying to guess what he felt. Were you saving it for someone special? I thought it was for nobody special. Now I'm not sure. His words warmed her heart. In the 3 days since his surprise proposal in the school, they'd been extra polite, unsure how to handle the change from roommates to maybe something more. Eliza had asked for time to think, and he'd given it without pushing, still sleeping in the barn and keeping things proper. But the air between them was different now. full of new possibilities they both felt but didn't say. "Thatcher," she started, then stopped, unsure how to say what she felt. "You don't have to decide tonight," he said gently. "Or tomorrow, or even next week, if you need more time. Whatever Blackwood's deadline, we'll find another way if marriage isn't what you want. That's the thing. I don't know what I want anymore." She closed the book, keeping the flower safe. "A month ago, my life was boring, lonely but boring. I taught school, went to my room, read books, wrote letters, and told myself that was enough. Now I wake up in your bed, wrapped in quilts you made. I drink coffee you made because you thought I'd want it. I eat meals with you and hear you talk about books, ideas, dreams, and I think this is what having a friend is supposed to feel like." Thatcher sat across from her, looking thoughtful. "That sounds like a good thing." "It is. That's what scares me." She met his eyes. "I've gotten comfortable here, Thatcher. Comfortable in a way that's not just about having a place to stay, but about feeling less alone. What if you say yes to marrying me and it changes everything? What if we lose this friendship for rules and what people expect? What if we don't?" His simple question hung there. Eliza looked at his face, the strong jaw, the messy hair, the patient eyes that never pushed her. "Tell me about her," she said suddenly. "The woman whose letters are in that box?" Thatcher was quiet so long she thought he wouldn't answer. When he spoke, his voice was soft with memories. "Her name was Catherine. We grew up on farms next to each other in Missouri. Everyone thought we'd marry someday, and we did too. She was sweet, gentle, everything a wife was supposed to be. But when I talked about going west, building something new, she didn't want it. She wanted to stay near family, live like her mom and grandma. Nothing wrong with that. Just not what I needed. So you left her." "She ended our engagement. Said she couldn't marry a man whose dreams took him away from what she loved." He paused. "She died of fever 6 months later, before I got to Colorado. Her sister sent me her letters, ones she wrote, but never mailed." "What did they say?" "That she regretted letting fear decide for her, that she wished she'd been brave enough to come with me." His eyes met hers. "I keep them to remind me that sometimes the safe choice isn't the right one." His words hit her hard. Eliza thought of her own safe choices, staying in her lonely room, teaching, but not dreaming of her own family, guarding her heart after Samuel's death. "I've been scared," she admitted. "Not just of Blackwood, but of this, of caring about someone again, of hoping for more than just getting by." Fear makes sense. Anyone who's lost someone knows how much it hurts to open your heart again. "But you're willing to risk it?" Thatcher leaned forward, serious. "Eliza, I've been half alive for 7 years, just going through life. These days with you, talking, eating together, knowing someone's here who cares if I come home safe, it's reminded me what living feels like. If we find we're not right for each other, we'll deal with it. But I'd rather try for something real than settle for something empty." The wildflower caught her eye again, safe in the book, like a promise kept. How long had Thatcher saved these bits of beauty, hoping to share them with someone who'd understand? "I have a confession," she said quietly. "What's that?" "I've been thinking about staying here for good. Not just till I find a place, but really staying. Waking up every morning knowing I'm home, sharing meals and talks and—" She stopped, blushing. "And everything else marriage means." Her words hung there, honest and open, full of the tension that had been growing since their first night by the fire. Thatcher's eyes darkened, his voice rougher. "Eliza, if you marry me, it won't be just to fix things or keep you safe. I can't pretend it's just practical. I'm saying I've been fighting feelings for you since that second night when you hummed while fixing your skirt, and I realized your voice was the best part of my day." He stood, knelt beside her chair, their faces close. "If you're my wife, I'll want it all. Your thoughts, your dreams, you in my bed, kids if we're lucky. Not later, but from the start." Eliza's breath caught at his honesty. "Thatcher, I know it's not how it's supposed to go. We should have months of proper visits and slow feelings, but we don't have months. Maybe we don't need them. Maybe some things are just right from the start, even if they're not normal." She looked into his eyes, seeing her own longing mirrored, the need for connection, for love that made you feel whole. The careful walls they'd kept up were falling, and she didn't want to rebuild them. "What if I said yes?" she whispered. "What if I said yes to everything? Then I'd make a promise." His hand touched her cheek, his thumb gentle, on her skin. "I'd promise to love you, protect you, cherish you as long as I'm alive. I'd promise to build a life with you that honors our dreams and makes new ones we haven't even thought of. And I'd promise the same," she said, her voice steady despite tears. "To love you, to build something beautiful with you, to be brave enough to hope again." When he kissed her, it was gentle, like he'd waited years for this and wanted to make it last. His lips were warm, promising a future they hadn't expected. When they pulled apart, both breathing hard, Thatcher leaned his forehead against hers. "Is that a yes, then?" "That's a yes," she whispered, feeling her walls crumble completely. Outside, the wind shook the windows, reminding them the world still had challenges. But inside, warmed by lamplight and new love, two hearts that had been empty were starting to feel full again. The legal paper lay on Thatcher's kitchen table like a scary note written in fancy writing. Jeremiah Blackwood had shown up at dawn, catching them off guard. Eliza in her nightgown and robe, Thatcher just in from the barn. "I thought you should see this before making quick decisions," Blackwood said smoothly, his cold eyes happy to see their cozy setup. "Your little love story just got trickier." Eliza pulled her robe tighter and read the paper, her teacher's skills helping her understand the legal words despite her racing heart. What she saw froze her. "This says you own the land under the schoolhouse," she whispered. "Yep, bought it from the territory 3 months ago, along with other useful land around here." Blackwood's smile was mean. "You see, Miss Hart, your job was never really about the school board's opinion. It was about mine." Thatcher stood behind Eliza, his hands on her shoulders as he read. "What's your point, Blackwood?" "My point, Mr. Cole, is that love is nice, but it doesn't change facts. Miss Hart can marry who she wants, but if it's not me, there won't be a school for her to teach in." "You can't close the school," Eliza said, but his smug look told her he could. The kids can go to school in Millfield, 20 miles away. Parents can figure it out. 20 miles is too far for most families. They can't afford to send their kids there, and the little ones can't travel that far every day. Not my problem." Blackwood folded the paper. "I need that land for business. If the school's in the way, that's too bad." Thatcher's hands tightened. "What business?" "Railroad plans, if you must know. The territory wants a train line through here, and I'm making it happen. The school's right in the way." "So this was never about wanting a wife," Eliza said, understanding his plan. "It was about getting rid of anything blocking your railroad deal." "Oh, I do want a wife, Miss Hart. Someone like you would help my business look good. But you're right. My main goal is making sure nothing messes up my railroad plans." "And if she says no?" Blackwood shrugged. "Then the school closes. The kids get sent to other towns, and Miss Hart's out of a job in a place where I control who gets hired to teach. She can try somewhere else, but she won't find much." His cruel plan took Eliza's breath away. He'd set it up so saying, "No would hurt not just her, but every kid in Willow Gap and their families." "There's more," Blackwood said, pulling out another paper. "I've been buying up debts and mortgages around here. Lots of folks, especially ranchers, are struggling to pay loans." Thatcher went still. "What are you saying?" "Your mortgage, Mr. Cole, from 2 years ago for more land and cattle. The bank sold me the loan cheap. Worried you couldn't pay it off." Eliza felt Thatcher's hands shake, her heart breaking for him. He was so proud of his ranch, built with his own hands. Losing it would be awful, but using it to force her into marriage was worse. "The payments aren't due for 18 months, Thatcher said, his voice tight. "Under the old terms, sure. But loans can be called in early if the lender thinks you're less likely to pay, like if your reputation takes a hit." "You jerk." "Language, Mr. Cole. There's a lady here." Blackwood's tone was calm, like they were talking about the weather, not ruining their lives. "If Miss Hart marries me, I might give you better loan terms, maybe even cancel it as a wedding gift to my bride's former landlord." The word landlord was sharp, showing Blackwood knew their relationship and planned to use their love against them. Eliza turned to Thatcher, seeing her pain in his green eyes. He's been planning this for months, hasn't he? Controlling everything. Looks like it. The question now, Blackwood said, is what you'll do about it. Miss Hart, you have till the end of the week. Marry me, and the school stays open. The kids keep learning, and Mr. Cole keeps his ranch. Marry him, and everyone pays for your choice. After Blackwood left, they stood in the kitchen, holding each other, feeling the weight of their situation. Everything they'd started, their new love, their hope, was poisoned by one man's greed. There has to be another way, Thatcher said. Some legal way to fight. With what? He probably owns the judge's mortgage too, and half the territory's officials. Men like Blackwood don't do this unless they know they'll win. So what do we do? Eliza looked at him, memorizing his face like she was already saying goodbye. We do what we have to protect the people we care about. Eliza, no. You can't mean... What choice do we have? If I marry you, 60 kids lose their school and you lose everything you built. If I marry him, only I get hurt. Only you? Thatcher's voice was raw. Eliza, you're not just anyone to me. You're everything. The thought of you with that man... He couldn't finish. I know, but sometimes love means giving up something to protect the ones you love. No. His hands framed her face, wiping tears she hadn't noticed. There has to be another way. I won't let him take you. What if there isn't? Thatcher looked around their safe cabin. When he spoke, his voice was firm. Then we fight. We find a way to show everyone what he's doing, to break his grip on this town. And if we can't, we leave. Everyone. We take the kids and their families and start over where he can't touch us. That's impossible. These people have homes, lives here. Homes and lives he's trying to steal. Maybe it's time we all choose freedom over staying safe. The idea was wild. Maybe impossible. Definitely risky. But looking into Thatcher's determined eyes, Eliza felt hope for the first time since this started. Maybe they couldn't fight Blackwood his way with his rules. Maybe they could fight with courage, community, and love that couldn't be bought. It'd have to be everyone, she said slowly. Every family with kids in the school would need to leave everything. Then we convince them, show them what staying costs and what leaving could gain. Give them a choice Blackwood never meant for them to have. Outside, storm clouds were gathering again, dark and scary. But inside, two people who found love in loneliness were realizing they might be strong enough together to face any storm. Thatcher's father's rifle lay across his knees like a link between past and now, its smooth wood worn by hands that used it to protect family and what's right. He sat on the cabin's porch before dawn, watching the horizon for the first light of what might be the biggest day of his life. 3 days had passed since Blackwood's threat, and they'd been the busiest 72 hours Eliza could remember. What started as a desperate plan had turned into a quiet rebellion. Families in Willow Gap coming together in ways that went beyond their own needs, reaching for something bigger and hopeful. It began with the Brennans. Eliza had gone to their farm, the night after Blackwood's visit, with a crazy idea. What if everyone left? What if every family hit by the school closing just packed up and moved where Blackwood couldn't reach? Mary Brennan listened quietly, while Tom paced their small kitchen, his worn face showing disbelief, anger, and maybe hope. You're talking about leaving everything we've built, Tom said. This farm, our neighbors, our life. I'm talking about saving what matters, Eliza said. Your kids' future, their school, the community that makes a place worth living. Where would we go? How would we live? Tom asked, but Mary was thinking. There's land in Oregon my brother wrote about. Good soil, timber included, far enough that Blackwood can't touch us. Oregon's 1,000 miles away. Mary. So's freedom, it seems. The talk went late, with neighbors joining as word spread. By morning, 17 families agreed to the plan, with more thinking about it. The next days followed the same pattern. Eliza and Thatcher became messengers of hope, going from farm to farm, house to house, sharing the plan to leave and build something better. Not everyone agreed. The Ashfords wouldn't even listen, Mrs. Ashford calling it a silly dream. Other big families felt the same, preferring the known over the unknown. But the idea was growing, fueled by desperation and the realization that they weren't helpless against Blackwood. They could choose their own path. The plan was huge. Tom Brennan, who'd been a wagon leader before, would guide the group. They'd travel in steps, selling what they could, carrying what they needed, sharing so no family was left behind. Mary Brennan and others wrote letters to Oregon contacts, getting promises of land and jobs. Most importantly, they'd take the school with them, not the building, but the idea. Eliza would keep teaching, and they'd start a new school wherever they went. The kids' learning wouldn't just continue, it would grow with the adventure. But first, they had to face Blackwood's reaction. "Any regrets?" Eliza asked, sitting beside Thatcher on the porch with 2 cups of coffee, steam rising in the cool air. "About what?" "All this. A week ago, you were a quiet rancher, minding your own business. Now you're leading a rebellion against the biggest man around." Thatcher took the coffee, his eyes on the horizon. "I've been thinking about that, how fast things changed. But really, nothing changed. The greed, the power games, the way men like Blackwood treat people like pieces on a board, it was always there. We just stopped ignoring it." A rider appeared on the road, racing toward town, leaning forward like he needed speed. "That's Billy Morrison," Thatcher said. "Tom Brennan's nephew. He was checking the route west for good river crossings." They watched him disappear into town, and Eliza felt a bad feeling. Something's wrong. Within an hour, Billy arrived at the cabin with bad news. Blackwood had learned their plan, and was stopping them with harsh moves. "He's got men on every road out of the county," Billy said, pale and tired. "Armed guys saying they have the law on their side to stop theft and breaking contracts. Anyone trying to leave with wagons or animals is turned back." "On what grounds?" Thatcher asked. "Debts, mostly. He bought up loans for almost every family joining us, and now he's calling them due right away." Eliza felt their dream slipping away. "How many families are stuck?" "All of them. And there's more. He's got marshals coming from the capital saying we're resisting legal debt collection. Anyone who doesn't pay faces arrest for fraud and conspiracy." Blackwood's plan was so thorough it was terrifying. He'd guessed their move and trapped them completely, making their brave plan look like a crime. "There's got to be something we can do," Eliza said, her voice showing defeat. "There is," Thatcher said quietly. "We give him what he wants." Eliza and Billy stared, shocked. "You can't mean—" Eliza started. "I mean we make him think he's won while we plan the real fight." His voice was grim. "Billy, go back to town. Tell everyone to act like they're giving up, like they're getting ready to pay their debts. Make it look real. But if they pay, they'll have nothing left to start over," Billy said. "They're not paying. They're pretending while we make a different plan." "What plan?" Thatcher stood, picking up his father's rifle. It seemed to change him, connecting him to something tougher. The kind that sees Blackwood for what he is. Not a businessman or lawman, but a crook who's gotten away with it because no one stopped him. "Thatcher, you're talking about fighting. I'm talking about justice. Sometimes they look the same." Eliza felt scared but also proud. This was a new side of Thatcher, harder, shaped by things he hadn't shared. But she still saw the man who gave her a quilt and shelter. "What do you need me to do?" "Trust me, and be ready to leave fast, with or without the others. I won't abandon those families." "You won't have to. But if this goes wrong, if Blackwood's worse than we think, I want you safe and alive. Whatever you're planning, promise you won't take big risks." Thatcher's smile was soft, despite his hard eyes. "I promise to come back to you, Eliza, whatever it takes." As Billy rode off to spread the new plan, Eliza watched Thatcher get ready for whatever was coming. He moved like he'd faced danger. Before, checking his rifle, organizing supplies, making careful plans like this wasn't his first time preparing for a fight. "You were a soldier," she said, things clicking into place. "For a while, after my family died, before I came here. I didn't want to carry that into this life, but sometimes the past decides what you have to use." The sun was up now, painting the sky gold and pink, like it was laughing at their dark situation. Somewhere, Blackwood was probably celebrating, thinking he'd crushed them. He was about to learn that some things, love, community, courage, were harder to break. "When do we move?" Eliza asked. Tonight, when the marshals are settled and Blackwood thinks he's won. His hand found hers, squeezing gently. By morning, we'll either be free or dead, but we won't be his slaves. His words sent fear and excitement through her. In 12 hours, their new life would either be safe forever or gone completely. No middle ground, no compromise. Just two people who found love in loneliness, ready to risk everything to protect it and their community. The town meeting bell rang at sunset, its bronze voice calling everyone with urgency. People came out of houses and farms, moving through the dusk to the schoolhouse where Eliza had taught so many hopeful days. The room was packed, with people along the walls and outside the steps. Faces she'd known for 3 years looked worried. In the lamplight, parents who trusted her with their kids, neighbors who'd become friends, families who dared to dream big, now trapped by their bravery. At the front, Jeremiah Blackwood stood by a table full of papers, his fancy suit standing out against the crowd's work clothes and worried faces. 2 marshals stood beside him, their badges shining, hands on their guns. "Thanks for coming," Blackwood started, his voice smooth and commanding. "I know it's been tough with all the rumors and confusion." The crowd murmured, holding back words they wanted to say. "I'm here to clear things up about your legal situations," Blackwood went on. "I hold legal debts on most of your properties, and they're due now." Tom Brennan stood slowly, his face hard but determined. "Those loans weren't due for years. You can't just change them to suit your plans." "Actually, I can," Blackwood said. "The loans have rules saying I can call them in early. If your situation changes, like if your morals are questioned or you're trying to skip out on debts by leaving." "Nobody was trying to cheat anyone," Mary Brennan called out. "We were saving our kids' school. By running away from your legal debts, hiding assets from rightful lenders," Blackwood said, his tone calm but sharp. "The law sees that differently." One marshal stepped forward with papers. "We have arrest warrants for anyone planning to leave, charges of conspiracy, breaking contracts, and resisting legal debt collection." The room went silent. Eliza looked at the scared faces, seeing people realize they were trapped. Then Thatcher stood up from the back, his father's rifle by the wall. He'd been so quiet, many hadn't noticed him. But when he stepped into the light, tall and strong, everyone looked. "Before anyone gets arrested," he said, his voice clear, "folks should know the truth about Blackwood's business." Blackwood's confident look wavered. "Mr. Cole, this isn't the time." "It's exactly the time." Thatcher walked forward calmly, facing Blackwood across the table. "Tell them about the bribes, Jeremiah, the officials you paid off. That's a big accusation, Mr. Cole." "Got proof?" "I do." Thatcher pulled a leather folder from his coat and set it on the table. "Letters between you and the territorial governor about payments for railroad laws. Bank records showing you paid Judge Harrison for land rulings. Records of you buying debts cheap." The marshals moved closer, but they looked unsure now. "Where'd you get those?" Blackwood demanded, his cool breaking. "Your office safe. A man can do a lot when he's fighting for love and knows locks from his army days." The crowd gasped. Eliza stared, shocked, realizing Thatcher's absence that day wasn't about fighting, but gathering proof, using his soldier skills. "That's theft!" Blackwood shouted. "Breaking in! Arrest him, Marshal Peterson." But Peterson was reading the papers, his face darkening. "These look real, Blackwood. If they are, we've got bigger problems than debts." Of course they're real," Thatcher said calmly. "Everything you need to show Blackwood's crooked deals is there. Bribes, bullying competitors, rigging land sales." The younger marshal looked lost. "If these are real, shouldn't we be looking at Blackwood, not these warrants?" "They're fake," Blackwood yelled, but he sounded desperate. "Made up to hide their crimes." "Then you won't mind if we check," Peterson said, "starting with a telegram to the Capitol to confirm these payments." "I won't allow." "You won't allow?" Peterson's voice was quiet but firm. "Blackwood, if you've been bribing officials and stealing land with fake papers, you're the one getting arrested." The room's mood changed fast. Blackwood, who'd been in control, now looked trapped. His eyes darted around. "There's more," Thatcher said, pulling out another paper. "Blackwood doesn't own the schoolhouse land. His deed's fake. The real owner is the education department, and they're not selling to railroads." Eliza felt dizzy with relief. How did you? Army friends in the capital. Mention corruption in railroad deals, and doors open fast. Blackwood tried to run, but Tom Brennan and others blocked him. Going somewhere, Jeremiah? Tom asked. This is illegal. Actually, we can, Peterson said, pulling out handcuffs. Jeremiah Blackwood, you're under arrest for fraud, bribery, extortion, and conspiracy. You can stay quiet, but I bet you'll talk plenty when we dig into this. As the marshals took Blackwood away, the schoolhouse exploded with voices, relief, joy, disbelief, and plans for what's next. Eliza pushed through to Thatcher, hugging him with tears streaming. You amazing, scary, wonderful man, she whispered. How long were you planning this? Since he threatened you, Thatcher said, holding her tight. Nobody threatens the woman I love and gets away with it. The future opened up, uncertain, but full of hope. The school would stay open, families would keep their homes, and two people who found love and loneliness could build the life they dreamed of. The telegram to the governor buzzed through the lines like lightning, carrying proof that would change not just Willow Gap, but how the territory handled railroads and land. Marshal Peterson worked all night, talking to federal officials, who'd been after Blackwood but lacked proof. Now they had plenty. Eliza stood in the schoolhouse the morning after Blackwood's arrest, watching officials arrive in carriages and on horseback, turning their quiet town into a busy hub. Hard to believe it's over, she said to Thatcher, who was helping. Fix the classroom after the big meeting. It's not over, he said, straightening desks with his usual care. It's just starting. Blackwood was one piece of a bigger corrupt system. This investigation will reach the capital, maybe even Washington. The schoolhouse door opened, and Marshal Peterson walked in, his badge shining in the sunlight. He looked tired but happy, like a man who'd finally won a long fight. Miss Hart, Mr. Cole, I need your statements for the record. Of course, Eliza said. How can we help? First, all charges against the families planning to leave are dropped. Blackwood's debts were mostly fake, forged, or gotten through bribes. The Attorney General says they're no good. Relief hit Eliza so hard she sat in a student desk. So the families keep their homes, their land, and their pride. Plus, they'll get money for the harassment they faced. Thatcher set down a slate he was cleaning. What about the school's land? It's safe, owned by the Education Department forever. Blackwood had no right to threaten it, and they're increasing school funding for more programs. And Blackwood? Peterson's face hardened. He's headed to the Capitol for trial on federal charges. Your evidence, Mr. Cole, started investigations across 3 territories. It's the biggest scandal around here ever. Outside, kids arrived for school, their faces bright. Jimmy Brennan chased his sister with a grasshopper, while Mary Carson carried her book like it held all the world's secrets. One more thing, Peterson said. The governor wants to meet you both. He's coming this afternoon to apologize for not catching Blackwood sooner. That's not needed, Thatcher said. We were just looking out for ours. Maybe, but you exposed corruption hurting honest folks across the territory. The governor calls you heroes. After Peterson left, Eliza and Thatcher stood in the schoolhouse, surrounded by the sounds of normal life. Kids playing, hammers fixing storm damage, the town going back to its routine. Heroes, Eliza said softly. Is that us? We're people who didn't let fear decide, Thatcher said. People who fought for what mattered and found each other when we needed it most. Hoofbeats outside made them look. A group of riders approached, led by a man in his 50s, looking important, in fancy clothes. That's the governor, Thatcher said. Ready for this? Being called territorial heroes? I'm ready for anything as long as it's with you. The governor's visit was as promised. Apologies, praise, and promises to stop future corruption. But for Eliza, the best moment was when he spoke to her students. Kids, he said, standing where Eliza taught, your teacher and Mr. Cole showed us what it means to stand up for what's right, even when it's risky. They fought for your school and your family's freedom. Mary Carson raised her hand. Will the bad men come back? No, sweetheart. They're going to jail, and your school's here for good. Good, Jimmy Brennan said, 'cause Miss Hart's the best teacher, and we don't want anyone else. His words brought tears to Eliza's eyes. These kids, caught in Blackwood's schemes would grow up knowing regular people could beat corruption. As the visitors left and school went back to normal, Eliza thought about her journey. A month ago, she was a lonely teacher, thinking being okay was enough. Now she was engaged to a man who risked everything for her, part of a brave community with a future full of hope. "Miss Hart," Jimmy called, "are you and Mr. Cole really getting married?" "We are, Jimmy." "Good. My ma says it's about time you both stopped being so lonely." Kids say the truest things, Eliza thought. When school ended, Thatcher came to the doorway, as he had so many times. But now there was no holding back. He crossed the room and hugged her like it was the easiest thing. "Ready to go home?" he asked. "More than ready." They walked to the cabin that was their sanctuary, soon to be their real home. Eliza thought of that desperate night 6 months ago, arriving wet and homeless with just her teaching book. Now she carried the certainty of being loved forever by a man who saw her at her lowest and gave her his heart. The bed that was once empty now promised shared dreams and closeness that made a house a home. As they got ready for their first night, as husband and wife, Eliza thought about their journey, from loneliness to love, despair to hope, 2 lives into one future.